Hey everyone, it's Ivan, kitbadger.com. Out here today to talk about the 2-day no-fail rifle class with Presscheck Consulting. So broad strokes, what was it? If you saw my video on the no-fail pistol class with Presscheck Consulting, largely the same thing. Again, a journey curated by Chuck Pressburg on self-discovery, this time centered around a carbine. And yes, I actually brought this, shot it, not without its challenges, but yeah, it was a pretty cool class. Initially starting off in the classroom.
And if I am adamant that knowing where the bullet is in relation to your reticle is a huge component to actually fucking getting hits in an open air gunfighting environment, then I need to give you the time to collect that data. So this class is going to be kind of way slow in terms of the grind, because I want you guys to know what your gun is doing.
We were pretty fortunate in that in this class, everyone at the rifle class had already shot the pistol class. So the classroom portion was more abbreviated in that didn't have to go over all of the housekeeping stuff. And also some of the other stuff had already covered it, to include the importance of using B8s, which we spend a lot of time shooting. Not because the B8 is this magical thing that is a perfect analog to an ocular cavity or whatever. Like, no, it's just a metric. And by using a metric and consistently using a metric to include the same metric, it allows you to actually gauge where you are, where you're going, and yeah, hopefully where you want to be. And so yeah, the importance of that. Again, a lot of these things got covered in the no-fail pistol class, but one of the things that did not get covered and definitely spent time doing was zeros. So what are you going to zero your gun at and why? And yeah, are you gonna run a 50-yard zero, 100-yard zero, 200-yard zero? Are you going to have a different zero for your irons? What kind of optic are you using? With that, how high is your optic? And I definitely appreciate Chuck, his time in the service. He did a lot of stuff, and with that, there's just these gems where we're talking about optics, and he's like, oh yeah, do you know why it's a 193 or a 203 mount? Yeah, because of this. Like, yeah, we were part of trying to figure out what we need to do for this. And keep in mind, like, these different optic heights you see where people are like, oh, I need this height for, maybe you do, but it's not like magically the best. They're just workarounds for other equipment that largely was on the gun or something that was already made for the gun. So, hey, what do we need to do to get this to work with this, rather than having to redesign some other piece of gear from the ground up or something, which that was pretty interesting. But basically went through and talked about all kinds of different zeros. And once we'd kind of largely wrapped that up, it's time to go out on the range and start shooting. Initially at 50 yards, working on, if not a 50-yard zero, creating a good group, and yeah, going from there. For my own part, shooting this little gun, I actually zeroed my dot, pulled this thing off, zeroed my irons, threw it back on, made sure I was still zeroed. Fortunately I was. And from there we started moving back again on paper, finally going up and shooting at 100 yards and printing on paper. I will say that's not really where this shines. 7.4 inch barrel, shooting steel case 7.62 by 39, but yeah, shot it, got a group at 100. We then pushed back and shot at 200. Again, really just refining zeros for people, whether it was, hey, you're gonna have your 50-yard zero, cool, got it. Now we need to see where that prints at 100 and 200 respectively. Or, hey, you decided you wanted a 100-yard zero, cool, refine it at 100 or respectively. Some people chose to get a 200-yard zero. So out at 200, making those fine adjustments and getting it where they wanted it. And then, of course, gathering that entire data from 200 and in, or respectively from, I don't know, like 50 yards on out, and seeing where that stuff prints. And then finally moving over some closer stuff up at basically, I think, 25 and in. Things this class was not a fundamentals class. Not a bunch of time talking about really any of that stuff. Grip, stance, it's like, hey, hold the gun, stand how you're gonna stand. More than anything, there's talk with respect to trigger press. And with that, again, a lot of self-discovery learning where, hey, what does your wobble zone look like? And part of it was this, I guess, mental like rearranging of, oh man, that target's really far, or oh, that target's really close, or hey, that target's really big, or that target's really small. Really, it comes down to something can be really far away, but really big. Conversely, you can have something really close, but really small, which is way harder to hit. And so it comes down to, think of it as wobble zone, where when you present the gun, I got my red dot, okay, what's acceptable? How much of that dot is moving through where I actually want the round to go versus how much of the time is that dot spent outside of where I actually want that round to go. And so that was a big learning point for everyone in the class of what's an acceptable like wobble zone, because it's not going to be perfect. Like, we're not shooting like off a bipod, rear bag, any of that stuff. Boom, gun comes up, you're at, I don't know, 25 yards, say. You need to make this low probability shot. And so how hard can you shoot versus how hard do you think you can shoot? And so with that, one, paper will keep you honest. And so working through those B5s on a number of different shooting drills at different distances to include, again, discovery learning, that whole offset, mechanical offset, and yeah, working our way kind of out and back and incorporating a little bit of movement in it as well. Day one was a lot of work and learning, but it's one of those where oftentimes people don't want to go do stuff that they're maybe not good at, and also things that like, oh man, can't we just do the flashy, fun stuff? Yeah, maybe, because I mean, paper will keep you honest. And we definitely did a lot of that on day one, but there was a lot of learning that came from that. Day two, still did some shooting on paper and definitely more learning. One of the things we ended up going through, which I guess it was never explained to me in an adequate way, and really appreciate the way Chuck approached it, even though it was super uncomfortable. Basically, you're getting down, keeping the gun horizontal. I shoot like this all the time, usually over a vehicle, but now we're actually shooting like that on paper at 100 yards. And so not only with the gun canted 90 degrees to the left, but also then 90 degrees to the right. And really amazing data point. Again, had never been pointed out to me. And there was just littered with gems. The entire class was full of stuff like that. To include, his classes are also low-key instructor development courses, in part who he's teaching. Most of the class was actually law enforcement who largely like trained the trainer, LE trainers for their respective departments, things along those lines. And so Chuck trying to put out good information to hopefully good people to go do good stuff. It's like, hey, quick instructor development cap on. This is why we're doing this. This is how we're doing this. So kind of the how and why of, hey, we're going to run this drill because it's going to actually force people to do this, which is what we're trying to get them to do. And we're going to do it in this way because with a compressed timeline and however many students, we're able to get more people through it than we otherwise would. And so, yeah, tons of little gems like that. Then pushing forward on day two, got in some shooting steel, which honestly is always just a lot of fun. Some of the things we were working was wide target transitions, which usually it's kind of a box that gets checked at shooting courses, and the way it's accomplished is there you are at 5 yards, and you were shooting on your target, and now you shoot on your buddies and your target. Cool. Check that box, transitions. Yeah, kind of. But if you actually are trying to do the thing, then you need to actually force the wide transition to where you can't just bam, bam, to where, hey, I'm in here, boom, eyes move, gun, boom. And man, not easy. And especially the way they were set up, like they were wide. And so you also, again, while we didn't work a bunch on stance, that absolutely came into it. And then kind of after the fact, after people had some discovery learning, talked about basically stance. Not so much as, hey, stand like this, so much as, hey, your body mechanically can move this direction, in this direction, depending. And with that in mind, if we're engaging here and here, how do you probably best want to do that? And so basically the mechanics of being able to shoot at these wide targets that otherwise, honestly, probably never really would have given much thought to. And then kind of towards the end of day 2, I guess, we had a block on basically shooting around barricades. And with that, story time. It was pretty interesting. One, Chuck wasn't telling war stories like back in the day. He would basically tell a story to illustrate a point that he was trying to make. And one of the things he was talking about was, while he wasn't there with the Rangers that were at Mogadishu, he ended up having the opportunity to go through and talk to all of those guys and get all of these individual war stories of wherever they were, whether they went to the crash site or whatever the person happened to be doing, like, hey, what was your experience? And being able to draw from that, from those experiences, and be like, okay, cool, noted, like, I'm gonna log that away. And one of the things he had mentioned was talking with, I think the guy was a lieutenant at the time, maybe a captain when he talked to him, and basically the issue the guy ran into of, they were essentially moving to the crash site or one of the crash sites, and they had to keep leapfrogging past these open roads, and they would take fire and like city blocks, come to an intersection, have to run across. And they had never shot other strong side. So unless the guy happened to be left-handed, no one had ever shot off their left shoulder. So coming up to this intersection and trying to pop out and make a shot, it just wasn't happening. And so this wild story of this guy basically trying to take out a guy in the back of a technical with a dishka, couldn't get the shot, eventually ran to the other side of the street, like braving fire, so that he could then get to the side he was confident and competent on, boom, break the shot, smoke that guy, make it safe for everyone to continue to move on. And it was one of those things that just was never trained. Within the industry, everyone's like, oh, never switch shoulders, blah. Cool, man. All right. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just saying there may be a time and place. And when you're presented with that time and place, if you've never shot off your other strong side, your non-dominant shoulder, it's probably not the time and place to learn. So might want to invest a little bit of time in it. And so yeah, little gems, stories along those lines. But we ended up doing a bunch of shooting around barricades, and then finally the whole thing culminated with a pretty crazy event. I can't remember the name of it. I want to say it was something along the lines of like VTAC Scrambler, and it's something that Chuck actually went through when he was coming up in the mill, and it obviously had a profound effect on him, and he's like, I want to pass this on to people. And he definitely passed it on. It's pretty much madness. And so you have a number of barricades. I think we had, 4 or 5 VTAC barricades and then these other barricades. And the way it was basically ran is off the left, you need to shoot off your left shoulder. Off the right of the barricade, you need to shoot off your right shoulder, and through 2 of the ports in the middle, wherever. And so you'd come up to the barricade, we'll say off the left side initially, and you need to engage, get a hit kneeling, get another hit standing, either order really. And then after that, transition to one of two ports. Both of them were the slots, I want to say, in the barricade. Doesn't matter what shoulder. Then when you get to the right side of the barricade, again, one standing, one kneeling off of your right shoulder. And largely the same thing with kind of the other barricades. And this madness just goes on pretty much forever. The way it works is you get slotted in. Initially, everyone starts on a barricade, starts shooting, moving across, moving left to right. As you're moving across, going as fast as you can, if you end up catching up with someone and they're basically, we'll say, in the middle ports and you just finished shooting the left side and they're still in the middle ports, you tap them, they're out. Or you finish shooting the middle ports, they're shooting the right side, they're not done yet, tap them, they're out. Or conversely, if you get tapped, you're out. And so it just turns into madness. I ended up shooting through that thing and actually ended up winning. I was the last person, and yeah, by the end of it, it's me and one other guy like fighting back and forth on this VTAC barricade. I say fighting, like there's times where I'm just like, shoot man, like I'm not gonna step over you, and then I'd hop in and try and get my shots. This thing ended up screaming hot. He's like, hey, load up every mag you had, like right before we start. And I'm like, I pretty much have like all my mags loaded, I think that I have. And then I'm like, maybe I have a spare one. Keep in mind, this is like a 28 round. I had a bunch of like, I think 24, 25 rounds. I had one 30 rounder. They're pretty much all on my person, pockets, whatever. I'm like, I better just in case. And so I go over all the 7.62 by 39 ammo I had brought in. There was 10 rounds left, like loose in there. So I jam up one mag of like 10 rounds. By the time this thing is all said and done, I've gone Winchester on everything except 5 rounds in my gun. Like a mag of 4, one in the chamber. And this thing's screaming hot. It was madness, but it was a ton of fun. And I won, and that was kind of cool. Overall, it was a rad class, and per the format, kind of same as the no-fail pistol, largely self-discovery between you and your capabilities and your weapons capabilities. It's a no-fail class. Think hostage rescue. So you're taking low probability shots, and hey, how hard can you shoot your gun? Like what is your gun capable of? And what are you capable of with your gun? And so really valuable, I'm like, man, why did I bring this gun? But really valuable, basically mapping all of that stuff out. Again, printing on paper. All the stuff that honestly isn't super fun to do. You're like, I just want to go shoot steel because it doesn't matter where it is. I just hit it and it sounds good because cool, I hit steel. And this was a lot of time on paper and a lot of accountability, like refacing target after target. And that's, again, one of those things where, hey, I don't know, what, 50 cents, 75 cents just left the end of your barrel? Do you want to know where it went? And so, yeah, there's value in refacing the target kind of every time you finish a string of targets, which is what we did, because it kept you honest and you could then go see, hey, why was that one out there? Oh, like that was me. Like I thought I had the correct wobble zone and I jerked it. Like I was like, I tried to make it go now and shanked that thing out. And so being able to get that valuable feedback, which, yeah, rather than just throwing away 50 cents, 75 cents, whatever it was, no, like it's worth refacing that target, putting in the time with that paper, and getting good, valuable information. And that's really honestly what that class was about. And again, I appreciate just the underlying, just the message of the no-fail too. Like the class is about how hard you can shoot and you learning how hard you can shoot, because the liability of every bullet that leaves your barrel is very real. And if it comes to you making a low probability shot, whether me as a responsible armed citizen or any of the police officers there, yeah, I hope they know how hard they can shoot when it comes time, because you either save the person or like now you've made a much bigger problem that you're going to live with for the rest of your life. So yeah, pretty solid skills. Like I said, really enjoyed it. Tons of gems kind of littered throughout the entire class, but pretty rad. If it's something you're interested in, there'll be a link down below and you can go check it out. But yeah, as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Double fire. Gun. 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 So I can get some pretty fucking nasty splits. I need to put some skinny jeans on for this shit.